Hi, I'm Josh Katzenstein. This is Luke Johnson. We are here to talk to you about Saints free agency. We are giving you this week's Dat Chat live a couple days early because we figure all of you will be watching March Madness, which begins Thursday, with Minnesota and Louisville. And no offense to you, Luke, but part of me wishes for the moment that Jeff were here so that we could talk about the game, break it down, because the Gophers are clearly going to whoop the Cardinals. Thoughts?
Go Tigers. I watch one college basketball team this year. It's the LSU Tigers.
You didn't watch Duke?
Did not watch.
Oh my God, dude! Zion is the best.
I heard he broke his shoe.
You heard it here first. Zion is the best.
I've never heard that anywhere before.
But a lot has happened since we were here last Thursday. I think the biggest news, obviously, is that Max Unger retired. It was a little bit of a surprise to all of us, but wasn't as much of a surprise to the Saints because Max said that he had been, keeping them in the loop. He'd been thinking about this since the season ended, and made the decision about a month ago and informed the Saints. So they were prepared to find a replacement for him. They didn't get a top of market center. Those guys signed right away, and obviously in hindsight, it seems like that maybe should have been more of a priority for the Saints, but they signed Nick Easton, formerly of the Vikings. He has starting experience at center and left guard. Obviously, he'll slot in at center for the time being. I mean, he's making $6 million a year, so I would think that the Saints, certainly think that he's, capable of, starting at center.
Yeah, I don't think he'd pay a backup $6 million a year. I don't think he's starting over Andres Peter or Larry Warford. I just thought it was interesting the timing of it. We talked to Max yesterday, and he did say this is something he's known for about a month. When he was like, I don't really know dates in the off season. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, that was funny because and I agree.
But I have no idea what day it is. I just go by holidays. Mardi Gras, St. Patty's Day. We've got Easter coming up next. Those are my off-season dates. Passover, but either way, they were in kind of a tough position, I think, because really they couldn't even go out and sign somebody until Unger went on the reserve list or the retired list, anyways, right? And then his salary came off the books. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely created some cap space for them, but. There's ways to manipulate these contracts, and a few of the contracts the Saints have signed haven't been added, officially to the system yet. Mario Edwards and Malcolm Brown have yet to be added, so we don't know exactly the details. Right now, I checked this morning, the Saints had about $12 million left in cap space, so you figure those two guys will take, a fair amount of that remaining space, away from the Saints, but I think, they still do have enough money to sign some guys like they always do. They do these backloaded deals, so it doesn't hurt the cap space very much this year. But in 2020 and years beyond, that's when a lot of the money comes off the books.
Foot emoji, can emoji.
Yes.
Josh Katzenstein style.
Got to kick that can down the road. There wasn't a good road one. There wasn't one.
But I think people are able to infer the meaning with the two emojis. You don't need a good road.
I hope so.
You don't need to be too obvious with it. You got to make people work for that treat.
If you hate my emoji use, feel free to tell us in the comments. Also, submit any questions that you have. We will be here until about 11:40 a.m., so I am all ears. And I guess, until those questions roll in, let's talk about Mark Ingram. I mean, the contract details finally came out today, and I was, just thinking the whole time, he must have gotten more guaranteed money. That is the easiest explanation for why he didn't sign with the Saints and decided to sign with the Ravens a day after the Saints agreed to terms with Latavius Murray, but he didn't. Latavius Murray got more guaranteed money. I mean, certainly right now it looks like the agents from Mark Ingram made a mistake and misvalued his market, but I think we're going to look back on this. If Mark Ingram thrives in Baltimore and Latavius Murray struggles here, I think the Saints are going to catch a lot of heat for not stepping up for the demands that he had, especially knowing the guaranteed money is something they could have matched.
Yeah, I really would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in those negotiations and just really understood where this broke down, because like you said, I think the deals are so similar, and you don't exactly know what Mark was saying and Mark's representatives were saying to the Saints what they thought he was valued at, and then like when it was the next day he signed with Baltimore, right? I don't know. I just would have loved to see where that all broke down. You know, that was the big commentary right after it happened was like that's the difference that you couldn't come back over that difference.
Right.
And like we were saying last week, $1.4 million per year annually. If you're not going by the guaranteed money, but the annual value I think is significant. But once we see the full details of the contract, it's not that much different.
Right. Yeah, and I think so. Yeah. Again, as we said last week, $1.4 million is a lot of money, and if anyone
still willing to
doesn't think that, please send it to us. We'll split it. We'll
Dude, I
split
think
it.
$700K is a lot of money.
You know what? I agree. Hot take. But a lot of people are like, oh, it's only $500,000. Like, okay, so here's the issue with NFL contracts. They're all reported as, the maximum terms of the deal, but typically in free agency, the guys don't see the end of that deal. So obviously Mark Ingram or his agents, were pretty confident that he would see the end of this 3-year deal. But the problem is that his third year is another $5 million, which is a lot of money for a running back. And I imagine it still will be 2 years from now. And there's no guaranteed money in that third year. So there's a good chance that Ingram becomes a free agent again in 2 years. And certainly, I would think there's a chance that, he could reunite with the Saints. But Latavius Murray, will probably be cheaper in the third year of his 4-year deal than Ingram would be once he becomes a free agent again. So I just think, there's blame to go around to pretty much everyone involved. But, ultimately, we haven't talked to, Mickey Loomis or Sean Payton. Perhaps there's a chance that they thought Latavius Murray was a better option. I don't
or
think so,
at the very least a similar option.
Sure.
Or somebody who could replicate the production.
Right. Yeah, but I guess we will wait and see. Everyone is asking about Jared Cook pretty much all day, every day since it was reported that he was visiting.
All of them I mentioned.
And I just want to tell everyone out there, if we had any news about Jared Cook, we would tell you.
I would just like to get that on a loop regarding literally everything. If I had any news on Teron Armstead's torn pectoral, I would tell you.
If I had any news about Ted Ginn coming back from IR,
that's a good one.
I would tell you.
That's a good one.
Hopefully,
we are in the news sharing business. Folks.
Hopefully, our video experts, Julie Bowden and Ryan Wilson in here, can cut that up and we'll tweet it out. This way I can share the video anytime anyone says, news on Jared Cook, what's up with Cook? Have you heard anything about Cook? Tell me what's going on with Jared Cook. Hey, what's up with Jared Cook? And it's nonstop. It's been nonstop. Trust me. I've even had a couple people accuse me of withholding information. Trust me, if I knew anything about Jared Cook, unfortunately, I don't. And so at this point, the Saints still need a tight end. Whether it's Jared Cook, I don't know. Whether it's someone else, we'll see.
There you have it. That's the latest.
So I think I just I think I just answered pretty much everyone's question.
Okay, great. All right. Off to a great start here, man.
I agree. What else we got going on? Am I missing the questions? There we go.
Here you are.
Talk about Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Brees.
Oh,
We can do that. So what did you think?
You could tell that question came from a journalist. Hi, Jennifer. Our sports editor, Jennifer, sent us that one.
So wait, what did you think of was it 14 years later? I mean, listen, I don't know if Teddy Bridgewater, the parallels between Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Brees exist, but they're certainly not identical because, Teddy Bridgewater is joining the Saints to be a backup. Drew Brees was joining the Saints to be a starter, but certainly two guys coming back from injury, going to New Orleans instead of Miami where there was also interest. And, we'll see if Teddy Bridgewater, eventually gets the starting job and leads the Saints to a Super Bowl. But
Also the 32nd overall pick of the draft.
Also the 32nd overall pick. Trying to think of what else they have in common.
Good dancers.
Grew up in the South. Is Florida the South?
I don't think Miami counts as the South.
Well, what's Miami?
South Florida. It's basically
I think technically, if we're looking at a map, Florida is the South. So they're both from the South. But
Please don't rip me in the comments.
But I do think it's it makes a lot of sense for both sides. You know, when Teddy Bridgewater's market sort of dried up, I mean, all these teams that needed quarterbacks pretty much got them before free agency started. Denver traded for Joe Flacco, questionable move. Washington traded for Case Keenum, questionable move. And then I think the Jags were sort of, you know,
they zeroed in on
Nick
Foles. Was the guy.
And I'm trying. Was there another one that needed a quarterback? I'm missing one.
No, I think that's all the like QB1 spots that
right.
filled up.
Yeah. And then Miami needed one, but Miami there's already been reports that they're planning on tanking this season. So I mean, even though they had interest in Bridgewater, I just don't think that's a desirable destination for him because, you know, whether they draft a quarterback this year or next year, you know, as soon as they do that, it sort of just ramps up the pressure for him because anytime a team drafts a quarterback high, every fan is like, let's get that guy in the game. We want to see what he can do. I mean, just look at Tyrod Taylor and Baker Mayfield last year. I mean, nobody in Cleveland wanted Tyrod Taylor to be starting. And he wasn't doing horribly. And Tyrod Taylor's not a terrible quarterback. I mean, he can definitely help you win games. Yeah. But obviously, you know, Baker Mayfield was much better and proved to be ready. So, you know, that's just how things work with rookie quarterbacks. And Teddy dealt with that last year in New York when they drafted Sam Darnold after they signed him.
Yeah. I think at this stage of his career, like he explained to us, like he understands that he's 26 years old. He's got a full career ahead of him, but I think you've got to set yourself up for that next step. So you can do that here. Potentially, if Drew decides to retire after next year, you're in a great situation with a lot of great talent around you, a really brilliant offensive mind to work with in Sean Payton. Or you can try to do that in Miami where you've got like no good skill players, and there's a lot of uncertainty with that franchise, and they're going to be drafting your replacement like either right when you get there or the next year. I think it makes complete sense to come back to New Orleans on a one-year deal. If Drew decides to retire, you can take the reins of this franchise, and if Drew decides to come back, you're a free agent again, and there's going to be, I'm sure, a couple other quarterback openings. You're another year removed from the injury. You get through the year healthy, maybe play a couple garbage minutes to show what you can do, and you get the contract. Yeah. I just think it makes a ton more sense than to sign in Miami, where you're basically going to be out of the picture in a year, and then you're just like the guy who, you know, was just kind of cast away, and nobody really wants that guy to run their franchise, I don't think.
Right. Yeah, because I think, you know, week 17 last year, Teddy Bridgewater, in theory, had a chance to help his value if he played well in that game against the Panthers, but he was also, you know, dealt a bad hand with, you know, a lot of backups playing in the game. And I think, you know, if he goes to Miami, it's basically going to be that for the entire season, where he's playing with a lousy group of offensive players. And so, you know, even if in theory he's starting and has a chance to rebuild his value, I just don't think, you know, Miami is the place to do that. So,
agreed.
But I did just see one thing. According to some reports, Robert Quinn could be a trade option for the Saints, according to the Miami Herald. Apparently the Dolphins are looking to dump Robert Quinn, and the Saints have a need at defensive end after losing Alex Okafor. We know they visited with Ziggy Ansah, but, you know, he's got some concerns with that shoulder injury that, you know, held him out most of last year. So I think, you know, that would certainly make sense, you know, depending on what the Dolphins are looking for. I think a player, you know, like Robert Quinn, based on, you know, just what the Patriots gave up, like a 5th-round pick for Michael Bennett.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in theory, the Saints could probably get him for about that, and I think that would definitely help their defense right away.
I think that'd be a brilliant move.
So we'll see.
Like with stuff like that, I think clearly the Saints are ready for Marcus Davenport to kind of ascend into a larger role.
Right.
But I still don't think it's a bad idea to have another veteran to balance that out.
Yeah.
And if you can, especially you can rotate these guys in and out, keep them fresh. You're not going to be rotating Cam out because he's a beast and plays like 90% of the snaps. But I think it's a good idea to have somebody you can have Davenport learn from, and you can keep his legs fresh, and you not just rely on him to go out there and hold down the edge for 80% of the snaps.
Right.
I think that really helped out with Okafor last year. It makes sense for them to do it again this year.
I agree. Let's see. Donald Woods Jr. asked, "What's your take on Nick Easton?" So I don't know much about Nick Easton. I haven't gone back and watched his film yet.
I know this. He's a Harvard man.
Did go to Harvard, just like Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Did he go there?
I don't know if you knew that.
No. Okay.
Breaking news to everyone out there: Ryan Fitzpatrick went to Harvard.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a high upside move. I mean, obviously, teams are interested in Nick Easton. He's already been traded twice in his career. Started his career with the Ravens. They traded him to the 49ers as a rookie, and then later that year, the Niners traded him to the Vikings, and the Vikings wanted him back. But there's definitely some reasons to be pessimistic about him because he missed all of last year with a neck injury. I can't imagine, I certainly assume that he's healthy just based on the Saints signing him to this deal, and he would have to pass a physical in order to sign the deal. But I just think that, the Saints need a center. They clearly like what they've seen from Easton, in the time that he's played. I think he started 21 games in his career, so
yeah.
Around there. And that was all in 2016 and 2017 with the Vikings, who didn't have a great offensive line, but in 2017 it was much better than it was in
They had a great line in
2016.
2017.
So I definitely think, it makes a lot of sense, and you definitely want, with this current offensive line, you want as much experience to fill into that center spot as possible, because when Max Unger leaves, pretty much anyone is going to be a downgrade this year just based on who is available. But I think that, having a guy with experience, and who's played with, Teddy Bridgewater and Latavius Murray, I think that could certainly help ease his transition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the fact that, he's pretty young too. I think he's only 26.
Yeah.
Makes this a pretty a reasonable signing. You're getting a 26-year-old proven starter in the NFL. He can play multiple positions, and I think $6 million a year, while that's clearly starter money, it's a bargain for a starting center, in my opinion. So we'll see how it plays out in the field, but I think it's a pretty good signing from here.
I agree. What's your opinion on the O-line this upcoming season? So obviously a lot of it hinges on what Nick Easton can do. The other four spots I think are pretty well solidified. I think Larry Warford's one of the best guards in the NFL. Teron Armstead and Rand Ramczyk might be the best tackle duo.
I was just going to say that
in the NFL. Obviously Armstead has to stay healthy. And Andres Pete, really up and down.
Yeah, he flashes. And that's the thing. That's the thing with Pete. There's moments when you see Pete just like maul somebody, and then there's other times when. Granted, he was playing with a broken hand.
Yeah, in the playoffs, it's hard to.
He was playing with a broken hand
yeah.
in the playoffs, so you can't judge him too hard for getting thrown around by Fletcher Cox. But there was times early in the year when he was just really hit or miss. But I think it's worth having that guy around when the other three guys around him with Horford, Ramczyk, and Armstead are just all-pro caliber players.
Yeah, and most offensive lines don't have 5+ players. So, even if Easton, is a downgrade from Unger, and Unger said when we talked to him yesterday that he didn't think he played that well last year, certainly not up to his standard. So perhaps, the transition will be easier, and, maybe Unger's, step down performance, was hidden a little bit because of the rest of the offensive line being so good.
Yep.
So I think there's reason for optimism. They also have decent depth. Obviously Will Clapp and Cameron Tom aren't proven, which is why the Saints wanted to go out and get Nick Easton. But I think they're both pretty good options as backups. Michael Ola has a lot of experience as a backup.
Yeah, and they really liked the way Ola played last year too, in his limited kind of time with the team.
Yeah.
And we haven't talked about this yet, actually, on the podcast, but Bushrod is apparently playing football again next year.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we weren't sure whether Jermon was going to retire or play football again in 2019. And he visited with the Panthers last week. So I'd be curious to see if I guess maybe there's not interest in bringing him back here. Maybe they're waiting it out and just seeing what the market is for him. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think there's any number of explanations, and it might not be guaranteed that he wants to come back. Maybe he just
Sure.
wanted to go to Charlotte, get a free meal or something. But he said after the year that he wasn't sure what he was going to do, and certainly taking a visit would indicate that he wants to be back, and I would imagine he wants to be back with the Saints. But it's just probably a question of how much he would have to get paid, and if they want to pay that, or if they have other backup tackles in mind.
He only played he only made
He was on a veteran minimum
1.2
benefit
million
deal
or
last
something
year,
last year.
yeah. So it certainly wouldn't hamstring them, but perhaps they have other guys in mind, like Michael Ola or
Sure,
something.
sure.
So let's see. Back to tight ends. This is from Kevin Comer on Facebook. It says, who do you see as the Saints' best free agent option at tight end, assuming Cook signs somewhere else? Hard to imagine they'd go into the draft without signing someone. Well, we haven't heard any reports about Cook visiting anywhere else, so at this time, it's hard to say where he'll end up. But go ahead.
Honestly, if it's not Cook, it's going to be the draft. I think. I think that we've seen the tight end market pretty much dry up. You've seen all the top guys sign elsewhere, whether it's
Zach Eifert.
Tyler Eifert re-signing
Yeah,
with Cincinnati. CJ Uzoma, I think, signed with Buffalo. Jesse James signed with Detroit. I think Darren Fells signed today. They're all scooped up. So if it's not Jared Cook, it's the draft.
Yeah. I can't believe Jesse James got $22.6 million. But what do I know?
Desperado, Jesse James.
So no, behind Cook, right now the best free agent is probably Austin Seferian-Jenkins, who's a very inconsistent player. He's definitely flashed at times, but I think that, I think the Saints would be better served just looking at the draft, especially because, look, Josh Hill, certainly not, a consistent threat as a receiver, but he's very good for what the Saints do. They're going to continue to run the ball a lot next year, and I think, Josh Hill, probably no matter who they sign, is going to play more than any other tight end, just by the way they run their offense. He was playing more than Kobe Fleener before Kobe Fleener got hurt 2 years ago. So.
Yeah, but I think if Jared Cook steps in and he's able to produce similar to the way he produced in Oakland last year, I would assume he would be on the field more than but like anybody else, I would think. I mean, they clearly like Josh Hill and what he brings to the team. They think he's capable of doing both jobs he asked a tight end to do. Obviously he's a very good blocker and he's a capable pass catcher. So
and the problem though with Jared Cook, and I think we've said this all along, is that the Saints are really tight. Against the salary cap. I'm looking at Spotrac right now, and it projects that Jared Cook's market value is about $7 million per year. And that's based on, what other tight ends have signed for this year, and Jared Cook, probably being better than all those tight ends. And I don't know if the Saints can afford that. I'm sure, that's, one of the reasons that there hasn't been a deal yet, because, they probably want him to take less money and sell him on the idea that, he could come join a championship caliber team and, maybe help them get to that next level. But, if they sign Jared Cook to the deal that he's worth, then they might not be able to add the rotational defensive end that they need, or a guy like Robert Quinn if they want to trade for him. So I think there's a lot of factors here.
It is a deep tight end.
It is, yeah. Too. So that's definitely something to consider. And I think if the Saints get a second round tight end, most tight ends struggle as rookies, but I think because you have Josh Hill, you can make it, you can simplify, the duties for what that rookie tight end does, and maybe you can come in and have some success.
Yeah.
A lot of people. Let's go along with that. Will the Saints wait to address tight end in the draft? Is Irv Smith a possibility? I don't really think Irv Smith would be a possibility if they had a higher pick. I think Irv Smith will probably be gone by the time they pick. Was it 62?
He will. I can almost definitely say he'd be gone by then.
I think the top 3 or 4 tight ends are probably going to be gone.
Yeah. Hawkinson, Fant, Smith.
There's one more.
I would say those 3 are definitely going to be gone by 62. But the Saints did say that if there's a player they really like at a position they need, if the opportunity was right, let's say Irv Smith slid to the top part of the second round, I could see the Saints making a move to trade up from 62 to like, I don't know, 38, 39, something like that.
Yep.
If Irv Smith fell that far, and I don't know if he will, but yeah, I think there's a possibility they could trade up to get a guy they really like, especially if it's, you know, Irv Smith just seems kind of really tailor-made for what the Saints want to do. You know, he's a big, fast, receiving threat, and I think, you know, he would be a guy that you could envision them trading up for if he fell.
One guy who might not be on a lot of radars, although I have started to see more people talking about him, is Kahale Warring from San Diego State. He's 6'6", grew up playing like every sport, like water polo, basketball, tennis, like all sorts of cross country. And you know, my understanding is that, you know, he could be this next like developmental tight end who becomes like a crazy receiving threat down the road. Obviously, that might not be what the Saints are looking for to help this season, but I think, you know, with a lot of, you know, day 3 picks, you know, that could be a guy that, you know, would make a lot of sense for them. But certainly I think they will emerge from the draft with at least one tight end, because that is their biggest need. Even if they sign someone, you know, it makes sense, you know, whether it's Jared Cook. I mean, Jared Cook's already in his 30s. So, you know, you draft guys for the future. I think a lot of people forget that, and I say it all the time, but use free agency to fill needs and use the draft to plan for your future, and you can load up on, you know, players that you already have, you know, you can load up on a position where you already have plenty of players, because those guys' contracts are going to come up. Like, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they took a linebacker. I mean, A.J. Klein is on the last year of his deal. You know, so I just say be prepared for anything, but certainly I would expect a tight end.
And it's just, for tight end in particular, I know we're talking about these 3 guys specifically that are like first-round talents, but I think if you look at some of the top receiving tight ends in football, a lot of them were mid-round draft picks. I think you can find, you know, Gronkowski was, I think, a 3rd-round pick. Kelsey, maybe a 2nd-round pick. Zach Ertz, I think, was a 2nd-round pick. Jimmy Graham was a 3rd-round pick. You can find these guys in the early mid-round you know, area if you just, you know, I guess getting lucky with some of this scouting, and that's, you know, what a lot of this is.
And a lot of it has to do with the fit. I mean, you know, if Gronk went somewhere else, he's probably not as good. You know, we saw Jimmy Graham go to Seattle, not nearly as good. I mean, Seattle's just not a team that has productive tight ends year in and year out. So I think, you know, if the Saints zone in on their guy and they have a plan, you know, for him and where he fits in, I think he could be good. It just might not be, you know, right away in 2019, because it's a tough position, because you have to understand the entire blocking scheme and the entire receiving scheme, and that's why a lot of, you know, highly drafted tight ends don't pan out.
But I think it does help that they have a guy like Josh Hill. They could draft a guy somewhat like Evan Ingram a couple years ago, who basically just stepped in and just did the receiving part and playing the tight end position. They can try. You know, the problem with that is, you know, clearly that you're kind of telegraphing something that you're doing by putting a guy in whose one job it is to go out and catch a ball. But you know, it can be done, I think.
Yeah. All right, we got a bunch of questions here. We'll try to go a little lightning round here for the last 13 minutes. Tony DePlane asks, here is an off-the-wall question. I know this is old news, but out of pure curiosity, I would like to get an understanding about this. I'm not sold on Eli Apple, and Delvin Breaux was briefly free from Canada, so why not invite him for a visit? He would obviously be cheap. Best case scenario, you get 2015 Breaux. Worst case, he doesn't have what it takes, and you cut your losses. Would have been nice to see 2015 Breaux across from Lattimore. I mean, that's a stretch, Tony. That's my initial reaction. Certainly, in theory, if you get 2015 Delvin Breaux, every team would be interested. But the fact that no NFL team, you know, wanted to take a chance on him after he had a really good season in the CFL should give you an indication that he's probably not an NFL caliber player right now. Guys can thrive in the CFL and then struggle in the NFL. Guys can thrive in the CFL, come here and maybe carve out, you know, a small role, but there aren't many guys that come in and become starters, you know, when they transfer leagues. Delvin Breaux obviously proved that he could, but I just think that, you know, there must be something missing, you know, that he's not doing. And, you know, he had his chances, was it last year, you know, after the injuries, you know, piled up. And I just think that, you know, that's a bit of a pipe dream. And certainly if there was something that could be done, I'm sure the Saints would love to have Delvin Breaux just because, he's a hometown guy and, it's a great story. I just think that it's a huge risk.
And the other part of that is I think the Saints are pretty much sold on Eli Apple.
Yeah, that's it.
I think he played pretty well after some growing pains in his first couple of weeks with the Saints. I think down the stretch he did a really nice job locking up some pretty good receivers.
Plus, you figure he has the entire offseason now to sort of, just hammer the playbook into his head. Maybe the Saints will be able to do a little bit more, with him knowing the entire defense. So I think, you're not the only person who's not sold on Eli Apple. He's definitely, been inconsistent throughout his career, but I think the Saints are pretty confident in him. And, this isn't going to make you feel any better, but if they think Ken Crawley is worth $2 million and they don't think Delvin Breaux is worth anything, I think that should tell you basically all you need to know about Delvin, unfortunately. Brandon Simmons asked, what's the draft plan with our second rounder? But it was in all caps, so I suppose I should have yelled that.
What is the draft plan with our second rounder? I hope that didn't hurt you.
I'll say tight end, or defensive tackle, or offensive line. Thoughts?
Tight end.
Okay. Yeah, it's so hard to project. That's why we haven't been doing any mock drafts. The Saints have no idea who they're going to get at the 62nd overall pick. They do, these mock drafts, among the scouts because they want to have some sense of who's going to be available on the board. But really, the draft is full of surprises. So by the time, they are on the clock, the 5 guys they had in mind could all be gone, or there could be 5 guys they had rated higher than those guys that are all still on the board. And I always say that you should just take the best player available, especially with a second-round pick. There's no guarantee that he's going to contribute anything as a rookie. Just look at Marcus Davenport last year. He was playing a lot, to start the year, but I think he had some struggles. And then when he got hurt, the second half of the season, he barely produced at all. So I think everyone out there has to be ready to accept the fact that the Saints probably aren't going to get that much production out of the draft class this year. But certainly, the top positions, I would say, would be tight end, defensive line, or offensive line.
Yeah, and I think another one you could throw in there is possibly receiver. Just because I think there's some high-end receiver talent in this draft. I think you're going to see DK Metcalf go really high because of what he did at the Combine. But I think we're not going to see 6 receivers taken in the first round. I think they could push some of that back to the second round because of how much defensive talent there is in this draft. Maybe there's a player the Saints really like there that they didn't think would be there, either at their pick or somewhere close to their pick where they can trade up.
Brandon Simmons with the follow-up. LMAO was to get attention. It worked. You're right, Brandon.
Good job, Brandon.
And thank you for the follow-up. And along the lines of what Luke was just talking about, we have a lot of questions in here about Cameron Meredith and Des Bryant. So I think Des Bryant, I understand why everyone wants to talk about him.
This is going to be another thing where we get Julie to cut this up and just have it at our fingertips.
No. I don't want this out there because Des Bryant is on Twitter way too much, and I don't need him retweeting this video or something. But I just think that there's no reason for Saints fans to even be thinking about Des Bryant right now. He tore his Achilles in November, which means that he's probably not going to be healthy enough to play until August at the earliest.
Healthy enough to even go out there.
Right, healthy enough to practice until August. So no teams are trying to sign Des Bryant right now, whether it's the Saints or anyone else, because he couldn't pass a physical. So I imagine he won't get signed until either training camp or the start of the season or even into the season. Think about it. Last year, he didn't get signed until November. Now, part of that is because he reportedly rejected some offers from other teams. But still, this is a guy who missed all of last year. He's coming off a really tough injury to come back from, and I just think that, he might sign here eventually. The Saints have said that they're interested in bringing him back, but I just don't think he's a guy that, A, you should be expecting them to sign now, or B, expecting a lot from, even if he does re-sign, once the season begins.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And as far as Cam Meredith goes, I'm really excited to see what he looks like the next couple months. We start seeing him out there for mini camps and whatnot. He clearly was not the guy the Saints were anticipating this year. He never was right. But I think if you can get him right, you have a chance to add a really dynamic player to your offense, a player that they have not had around here for a while. So holding out hope that we're going to see a different Cam Meredith this upcoming year.
So David Kinney asks, what's the over on, and listen, I want everyone to know that this is David's words, not mine. What's the over under for games played by Mr. Glass, Armstead? Don't you think some of Pete's struggles is having to switch positions to cover for Armstead? So over under for Armstead, I guess we'll say 10 games. He played 10 games last year, and he's still yet to play a 16-game season. And I think, it's really unfortunate for the Saints, but it is beneficial for them to have Pete being able to kick out to left tackle. But I just think that, people need to stop riding Armstead. I mean, it's not his fault that he gets hurt. And when he is out there, he's an all-pro left tackle. Yeah. So I've seen people say that, he should take a pay cut, and I just think that's absurd. Like, why would any player take a pay cut, especially when you're one as good as Armstead?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Look, when Tehran is healthy, and I know that's it's probably getting a giant eye roll from some members of the fan base, but he is an elite player. He's just an incredible athlete for somebody his size. He's, I think, the best pass blocking left tackle in football. He's a great run blocker too. The guy's just an all-pro caliber player. He deserves every penny of what he's getting. You saw how good the offense was when he was in there, and how the offense dramatically dipped after he got hurt. I think you got to keep that guy around and let him get a chance to get that one season where you play 16 games, and then all of a sudden you go on a streak and you're not Mr. Glass anymore. And I don't think the loss of him contributed to Pete's up and down play. I think that's just more who Pete is as a player. He's not the consistent force that Armstead is when he's healthy.
So the Mr. Glass thing, when I was in Detroit, Matt Stafford was labeled Mr. Glass because he had the shoulder issues his first couple years, but he's played like pretty much every game since then. So Luke's right. I mean, once you figure out what it takes to get through a full season, maybe you can replicate that. But until we see it, there's obviously going to be concerns about Tehran, and his health. But one thing, like Luke was saying, I think the Saints did really well to sort of zone in on Pete and knowing that he can really play on the left side much better than the right. You remember early in his career, they were trying him out at right guard and right tackle. So I think they've done enough to simplify it for him. And I just think he's a better guard than tackle. So when he does move out to tackle, it does sort of exploit some of his weaknesses. Right. But still, I mean, that makes him a really valuable player. Austin Danton, who, let's give a shout out to Austin. Austin follows me on Twitter, and he's very active. And I don't know if he knows this, but I know that he was the quarterback at Toledo because I'm a big MAC football fan. Go Rockets. One of my editors back in Detroit was from Toledo, so I used to tell him Go Rockets all the time. So,
how about that?
Shout out to Austin. I would really love to know your opinion on how the Saints have handled their minimal salary cap this offseason. Do you believe their free agent signings have been at a good value? I do think they have been, actually, yeah. And I wrote about this before free agency started because I thought it was important to, warn fans that they weren't going to be signing any of these top-of-market guys because, A, they can't afford it, and B, those deals just normally aren't good. A lot of the top-of-market guys that sign for these contracts end up getting cut 2 years into their deal because they don't live up, and a lot of times it's because the team that they're originally on, if they're not wanting to pay that guy, then there must be some reason for it, and it's probably because he's flawed, whether it's the way he plays, whether it's his health, might be something with his mentality. I mean, whatever it is, I think the Saints have done well to avoid, the big spending spree. I think Malcolm Brown is probably a really good move. I mean, you look at getting him, what was it, about $5 million per year?
And I saw the Monday morning quarterback column by Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated had an anonymous executive saying that's like one of the best value signings out there so far.
Yeah, I think they probably overpaid a little bit for Mario Edwards, just based on what he did with the Giants last year, which was pretty much nothing, just in terms of statistics. And I talked to somebody who covers the Giants who said he didn't really flash that much, but still, I mean, he's a guy who's versatile and really fills multiple needs for them because he'll probably play on the interior. And probably play a lot with Sheldon Rankins and David Onyemata potentially missing the start of the year. But they can also help, as a run-stopping defensive end if the Saints want to kick him out, and depending on which other defensive end they bring in this year. So I think, even if they had to overpay a little bit for him, he still didn't get paid that much. I think the Will Lutz contract was really good.
Yeah, I mean, if you go down the list of the guys they re-signed from their own team, you're paying $4 million a year to arguably the top 3 kicker in the NFL right now. You're paying $5 million combined for 2 of your top special teams players, team captain kind of guys. I think that's worth it. And then the one luxury signing that they made really was Teddy Bridgewater at $7.25 million a year.
Yeah.
But that's a 1-year deal, and that's potentially your successor for Drew Brees next year. And if not, then you've got really the Saints have the best quarterback situation in football for this second straight year. So I think that's the luxury signing even is something that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not even full luxury because, having Teddy Bridgewater helps your offense even if he's not playing because it allows, Taysom Hill to go out there and be the versatile weapon that he was last year and potentially even more involved in the offense with the Saints knowing that he's going to be the number 3 option and Sean Payton can draw up plays for him all off season. I think, when we do look back on this, obviously the biggest question is going to be whether Latavius Murray, has filled in sufficiently for Mark Ingram and whether the Saints made an error in not, stepping up the money for him. And then, we'll see if they get enough production from the interior guys, to help while Rankins and Onimata are out. But certainly there isn't anything that's sticking out about the Saints' free agent moves that makes me just think that they totally blew it or, missed out. So thank you for the question, Austin. We have 2 more. Derek Washington, can the Saints stop drafting a running back at the end of the draft? They wasted picks on Daniel Lasco and Boston Scott. Were linebackers and pass rushers so terrible at the point in the draft they couldn't have been couldn't have been drafted instead? I don't think those are wasted picks. You need depth at running back. And first of all, Derek is the first person who I've ever heard that didn't love the Boston Scott draft. Everyone all season was like, why can't Boston Scott get in the game? Why is he on the practice squad? Why don't we get him involved? So I think, none of their draft picks from day 3, even were on the team by the end of the year. So clearly, there was an issue with either their scouting or their projections. So I don't think that you can say that the Saints missed out. Most day 3 picks never play a down in the NFL.
And Lasco was a productive player as a special teamer too. Before he got hurt. So.
And Boston Scott ended up playing for a team that was in the playoffs and being a return man. So I think both of those, make sense. For what the Saints had envisioned. It just didn't pan out, and I don't think that you can guarantee if they drafted a linebacker that would have panned out.
And if you try to use picks on late round picks on pass rushers too, some take Al-Qadim Muhammad in the 7th round the same year, or I guess 2017. He made the team, played the whole year, and then he got cut at the end of training camp last year. So it's just the way it goes with these late round picks. It's really hard to hit on those guys, and obviously there's less incentive to keeping those guys around there is for the early round picks, so they have a shorter leash.
Right.
It's just kind of the nature of the biz.
I'm just glad to see someone is actually thinking logically about Boston Scott because it was great. That was one of the other. If we go back 20 minutes ago to those questions that we kept getting, one of them was, why isn't Boston Scott involved? And it's like, or remember they cut him after the preseason, and everyone's like, how could we cut Boston Scott? But then no other team picked him up. So clearly that shows that even though he looked good in the preseason, other teams didn't think he was worth bringing in. So, it's all a crapshoot, day 3 of the draft. And then last question from Kenton Urema. Do you think it will be more of the Kamara show now, or does Murray take Ingram's full role?
I think Murray takes like 80% of Ingram's full role. And I think we'll see Kamara in the 18 to 20 touch range, but I don't think they want to give Kamara just like a full-on workhorse workload. I think they want to retain some of the things that make him a special player, and it's really hard to do that when you're just feeding him the ball over and over and over and over again. You need to be able to move him around. You need to be able to use misdirection and kind of get people on their heels to really get the full advantage of Alvin Kamara, and I think using Latavius Murray pretty heavily in the game plan is part of that. Your thoughts?
I agree. I think, the big issue with Murray is that he's just not as good in the passing game as
Yeah.
Mark was. So I think, that's ultimately going to limit his role. Perhaps, I imagine the Saints will find ways to get both of them on the field similarly to the way they did with Ingram and Kamara. But I just think that, from everything I've seen, Murray is not quite as good of a player. So a little bit of that role will shift to Kamara, but the Saints don't want to overload Alvin like they did to start the year last year, but we'll see how it plays out. And thank everyone for. Geez, I'm struggling here.
He's about to go on a cruise, so his mind is elsewhere. So,
but this has been fun, and I can't wait to be back here next week. But you can find all of our Saints coverage at NOLA.com, and we'll be back next week to talk Saints free agency, because I'm sure they will be adding some more players and potentially losing more players. And thanks for joining us.
which I will write about while he's on the cruise.